Hello and welcome back to Underlab. A long time ago I made a video on Undertale's saddest moments. That was a pretty difficult video to make as the game is absolutely full of them and it's pretty hard to categorise what makes something more emotional than something else. What I haven't explored before is which character really has it the worst. You may be inclined to jump to obvious conclusions such as Asriel or Chara, but it turns out almost every character in Undertale has a sad story to tell and they're well worth comparing. For example, there's Asgore and Toriel's depressing isolation and the dark reasons for why Frisk may have travelled underground. So it's time to find out who the most tragic character in Undertale is. Let's start by talking about the very first character we see. No, not Flowey, I mean Frisk themselves. Even though we play as them, their origins are shrouded in mystery, but there's a tint of sadness to it wherever we look. Think, for example, how quickly Toriel inserts herself as our surrogate mother. She seems to have some natural motherly instincts for us, almost as if we're playing as an orphan, which may be possible. At the end of the game, two important lines of text define Frisk as a character. In particular, it's a choice to say whether we have places to go and when Asriel asks us why we climbed Mount Ebott in the first place. It's clearly left for the player to decide, but it feels strongly implicated that Frisk was most likely depressed and they hope to take their own life by falling down the massive chasm that leads to the ruins. However, likely by some magic, Frisk was spirited away and saved, and instead she lands perfectly safely on a bed of golden flowers. Assuming we go on the pacifist route, Frisk goes on to become the saviour of monsters, and they end up having a lot of friends, so the human story inevitably has a happy ending, just as long as we don't go on the genocide path of course. What happened to Frisk throughout Undertale isn't particularly sad, but there's no denying that their backstory is an enigma and likely deeply emotional. As we mentioned her, let's next move on to Toriel. Formerly Asgore's wife, she enjoyed a happy reign alongside her dear husband. Even when pushed underground, the pair stuck together against all odds, knowing they had to stay strong for the sake of the kingdom. In fact, they even brought new hope into the world when the heir to the throne, Asriel was born. Still, it wasn't to last. With Asriel's death and Asgore's subsequent declaration of war, Toriel was too upset and too sick of fighting to stomach any more. She fled to their former home, literally called home, within the ruins, taking up shelter in what was presumably once her and Asgore's home. It's here that she's lived since, lonely and cut off from the rest of the world. Thankfully, she does have some monsters such as Frogget and Whimsun to keep her company, but not much else. Sans comes to her door at times and they tell jokes to one another, but that's really all Toriel has. So to recap, Toriel lost her son, her husband, and now all her friends, and the monsters who admired her probably aren't sure if she's even still alive. Pretty tragic if you ask me. It's a good thing that when we come along, we give her something to protect and cherish, along with freeing her if we shatter the barrier. Before moving on from the ruins, we of course have to talk about Flowey. This is a character with such an incredibly depressing story that even he's tried to forget it. Flowey was once Asriel, the aforementioned prince and the heir to the crown. However, in a bid to escape the underground alongside his human friend Chara, he died, and his essence fell upon a patch of ground where a golden flower began to grow. Dr. Alphys injected this same flower with a mysterious substance known as determination, and the flower came to life, becoming the soulless creature known as Flowey. What's especially sad about this is that Flowey doesn't even know how to show his emotions anymore, and for some reason he can't bring himself to feel empathy without a soul. Therefore, he's little more than an insane killer these days, even though what he truly longs for is a return to his real body. Well, he finally gets that at the end of the pacifist route, but by then he's worked himself into such a frenzy that he attacks us even then. Poor Asriel has been stuck in a downward spiral of depression, death and misery for years, and is undeniably one of the most tragic characters in the game. Moving into Snowdin, we have Papyrus and Sans. There doesn't seem to be anything tragic about these two, right? Well, actually there really is. Sans only smiles and plays so many pranks to keep himself from being depressed. Having somehow seen into the future, he knows there's at least one timeline where everything just ends. In other words, the genocide path. It's pretty depressing to think that he's just trying to cope with an apocalyptic future that he views as inevitable and impossible to avoid. Sans seems like such a cheery and upbeat character, but sometimes he shows his darker side, such as within Mettaton Resort and of course on the genocide route. Sans therefore is a tragic hero, as in the end he'll fight to stop us even though he knows better than anyone else that it's pointless. Sans fortunately does lots of funny stuff to try and keep himself sane, and for that reason he seems less tragic, even if on the inside he's a deeply upset skeleton. As for Papyrus, well, I hardly need to go into the tragedy that is Papyrus's cooking. In fact, that's so sad that I have to disqualify Papyrus just to make this video fair. Next we have the denizens of Waterfall. I'm sure you've never thought of Undyne as a tragic character, and truthfully she's definitely one of the less depressing characters within the game. However, have you considered this? Undyne has led a sheltered life, knowing nothing but the worst about humanity. So much so that she views a child like ourselves as a tremendous threat who needs to be destroyed immediately. Maybe she's not wrong on the genocide path in all fairness, but still. Speaking of which, the way she's willing to sacrifice herself to save monster kids is undeniably pretty tragic. It's clear that she takes her role as the protector of monsterkind seriously, to the point that she'd sacrifice her own life to ensure the safety of an innocent monster. Within Hotlands we meet Dr. Alphys, who at first appears perfectly happy. However, as with many characters in Undertale, there's more to her than meets the eye, and Alphys is harbouring a very dark secret indeed. It turns out she was responsible for the Twisted Amalgamates experiment that resulted in the merging of several monsters. This has left her confidence in tatters, reducing Alphys to a nervous, stuttering introvert who may even be considering suicide. I say that because she goes missing at the end of various neutral paths and suggests she may have been thinking of doing something cowardly on the pacifist route. Alphys has it harder than a lot of characters in the game, as her own efforts to save everyone went horribly wrong and just made things worse. Alphys has every reason to be depressed considering the terrible things that have happened to her, and it's very sad to think that her story only gets darker unless we go on the pacifist route. Mettaton, meanwhile, is probably one of the cheeriest characters in Undertale. Even when defeated, he realises how much monsters appreciate him, and this leads to the satisfying conclusion that he's going to stay on as Monsterkind's sole celebrity. Then there's Asgore, who truly is a depressing character. Having lost essentially everything he ever cared for, he now has to shoulder the burden of the entire kingdom's hopes and dreams. This led him to making unpopular decisions, such as waging war on humanity once again, so that monsters could at least have some hope of ever escaping the underground. With that decision, he knew he had earned the ire of either his people or his wife Toriel, and he decided to do the only thing that could restore hope to the kingdom. Truly, Asgore's life is extremely tragic. Finally, there's Chara, a mysterious human who fell underground one day and became the adopted sibling of Asriel Dreamer. It seems they were destined to throw away their life for a hopeless plan, and we never really fully understand what Chara's motives were. While there's undeniably sadness here, it's difficult to say just what exactly Chara hoped to happen and whether they really are a tragic character. So who has it worst? It's a very difficult decision, with the revelation that pretty much everyone in Undertale has some sad story to tell. Therefore, I'm going to split it into the three routes, as the different events can result in some characters' lives improving. On the pacifist route, I'd say it's undeniably Asriel. As we know, even though we save him and everyone else, he's still destined to turn back into Flowey, which really isn't a very happy conclusion at all. While everyone else gets to explore the surface, Asriel's story ends there and then in an almost unnecessarily depressing fashion. On the neutral route, I'd say it's Alphys. As it's heavily implied that she took her own life, there's very few characters with a more depressing fate than that of Dr. Alphys. It's a good thing we can restore her to her senses on the pacifist path. Finally, on the genocide route, I'd say it's Sans. It's sad to watch Sans fight against something he knows he can never truly beat, but his bravery to the last moment is commendable. Rather than go out like a loser, he puts up one hell of a last stand, showing the player that the monster's will is unbreakable, even if we kill their physical bodies. That's where I guess Sans just wanted to remind us of how cool he is. Sorry for the slightly depressing episode. However, there's no denying that Undertale is a game full of extremely sad moments, and I thought it might be interesting to see which character really does get the short stick out of everyone. It has to be said that Asriel has it particularly bad, seeing how there's no path you can take where he actually enjoys a happy ending. The fact that so many of the characters have tragic moments makes it easy to sympathise with them, and it's surely part of the reason why so many people loved Undertale's story. What's your opinion? Who do you think is the most tragic character in Undertale? As always, I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't get turned into a soulless flower, and I'll see you next time. Before I go, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to my patrons, my head scientists Asgore and Chara, Cameron Vigil, Kay Jensen, Sophronius and Mary, and my Underlab scientists Crystal Sleet, Nicholas Dux, Armin Arlett, Marisa Ray, Corey Kidwell, Yushio Coroni, Sarah Wydra, Emily Gatewood, and Amphrax MLG. If you enjoyed this video, please consider checking out the Patreon link below, as well as the video that explains why I'd so massively appreciate your contribution.